But everything has connectivity now, and
Hmm.
every business is going to, have some sort of AI systems, agents. I think one of the things that would keep me up at night if I were a sitting CISO as we move into agents, and how is that really going to be secured? Because now
Hmm.
you have a digital asset that can take actions with certain authorizations, just like a human can. So how are you going to govern that and the proliferation of that across an enterprise? And then on the attacker, side of that, they just, and ransomware as a service. Now these affiliates are just going to sell agents. Like, hey, take my fleet of agents, go do bad things.
Welcome to the Security by Default podcast, the podcast where firewalls are hot, passwords are long and strong, and cybercriminals are probably listening to. I'm your host, Joseph Carson, ethical hacker, security nerd, and the guy who reads the terms and conditions so you don't have to. Each episode will break down the weird, wild world of cybersecurity, minus the jargon, and plus a few laughs. Whether you're a pro or just here to figure out what the hell zero trust really means, you're in the right place. Let's get secure and have a little fun on the way too.
It's awesome to be here with you again for another exciting, fun conversation with amazing and awesome people who really do everything they can to make the world a safer place online. I've known this person for many, many years. I always enjoy meeting him at different conferences around the world, and mostly in the US. So it's where we typically get to meet up. So Terence, welcome to the podcast. And it's so awesome to have you on. If you want to give the audience a little bit of background about yourself, how you get into the industry, and what you get up to these days.
Sure. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate the invite and happy to join you. So yeah, man, I've been in, cybersecurity and IT for 26, 7 years or so. You'll appreciate this. My first computer was a Commodore 64.
Whoa,
So
awesome.
I'm dating myself right now. But, at an early age, man, I just had that inkling to tinker, man. I used to take my toys apart, put them back together. And that just kind of led me into, IT. Fun fact, I was actually an information systems major in the School of Business, like when I was in college. So I had the option to go on computer science or business. I saw the math on the comp sci side, and I was like, this business degree looks like it may suit me a little bit better. But I've done a number of, I've worked in a number of industries, public and private sector. I've been a CISO, a couple of, different places. I've been a privacy officer for a small stint. Don't want to go back to doing that. And, now I'm currently Microsoft as a customer security officer. So essentially, sitting on the advisory side of things, partnering with our customer, CISOs, CTOs to really help them with their strategy, their programs, really helping them, maximize their, cybersecurity investments, and also helping them skate to where the puck is going and not where it's at.
Absolutely. I mean, we're doing very similar activities in that regards because from my advisory CISO responsibilities, it's exactly that. And I really enjoy it because I get to go and talk to different CISOs and really listen about what's their challenges, what problems, what technologies they're looking to solve those. Just being able to share experiences and insights and learn from that, and also share some of the best practices. And to your point, help them get to where they need to be rather than just firefighting constantly. And I think that's the challenge. If you're firefighting, you're not being as efficient and effective as you really want to be. So I really want to get your perspective on what is some of the top challenges that CISOs do face. What's the common stories that you hear and the pains that they have? What do you hear from the field?
Well, as of late, this is a old but new problem, but what's old is new and what's new is old. Unless you've been under a rock, this whole AI transformation that, the world is undergoing right now has exposed some old things. And when I say old things, we're still talking about identity and access management and data security. Largely, AI in this current iteration is still, a web app of sorts. It's a fancy web app, but it is done in organizations that didn't have strong governance capabilities around, identities and data. It is sort of accelerated the need to double down on identity and access management and data security. So I would say next to ransomware,
Mm-hmm.
data security is top of mind probably in every conversation I have on, from inventorying your data, classifying your data. This is 25 plus years, we're still talking about DLP technology and strategies. And it was one of those things where, especially large organizations, did, about 35, 40% of it. And it was like, But now with AI and the ability for these tools to reason over large amounts of data in a small amount of time, it hasn't given access to end users that they didn't already have. But what it's done is highlighted the access that they have to things that they didn't know they had access to. And that gets interesting really quick. So you start thinking about HR data or maybe IP. So, the data security, privacy, all that. And then, kind of double clicking on that, the potential, we're talking about shadow IT, now shadow AI, because,
It's a term that I've
people are
been using
curious.
recently. Shadow
People get
AI
curious,
is
Yeah. So,
and what data is going, what are they putting in there, and who has access to it, and what algorithms are running against the data, and maybe uncovering things that you didn't want to be uncovered in the first place.
exactly. And we're still a curious people.
Mm-hmm.
When the air news is talking about things like, DeepSeek, everybody's
Yep.
like, let me go download it. Let me see what's going on. That was an interesting week, by the way. But yes, a lot of firewall rules that went in place. Like, no, we can't do that. But that's just the current state of the world, man. People are curious and data has not been properly, even from things that we shouldn't hold on to. We started talking about data retention. Now people are going back. It's like, what? Why do we have 20-year-old financial data that we didn't need to keep beyond the regulatory requirement? So data, man, it's all a data problem.
It's interesting because recently I did an interview and a discussion with IT Brew, and they were talking about the chief data officer. In some places they've got the digital officer, and it's really that person who's looking at, one is what are we regulatory required from a data perspective, and also how can we maximize the monetization of the data that they have as well. And then you look at, even one of the things I've saw in the past year, we talk about how attackers are using AI to compromise and to, the one thing I find them using it the most on, two specific areas. One is improving the efficiencies of phishing campaigns and social engineering, but also accelerating the understanding about what data they've stolen. So they can actually
Absolutely.
analyze it. They can analyze it sometimes in minutes now and really understand about what's the value of that data, where's the credentials, what, credit card information or financial information or IP is in there, and they can do it really fast. Where it used to take them months to analyze what they stole, now they can do it in seconds. And that really changes the speed of things for an attacker.
Absolutely. And wait to, we've been talking about, still now, decrypt later. Wait to quantum really becomes an attacker tool, and now they can pair quantum decryption
Yeah, yeah.
with these large language models to reason and over the data that they've already taken. So it's a bold new world that we're living in when it comes to the velocity and the speed of the attacks, as you mentioned, which makes it that more important for CISOs to actually bring AI into their security stack, because you're going to have to combat AI with AI. That's the only feasible path forward.
Absolutely. I had a fun episode last year with Miko, and we talked about the battle of algorithms. It really comes down to who has the best AI algorithm and agents, and also who has the most, let's say, accurate and clean data, because that's what makes
Yes.
a difference. You can run as much algorithms as you want, but if the quality of your data is poor, you'll have hallucinations.
Yep. Yep.
And that's the worst thing you have, is that when the algorithm's telling you fake disinformation itself, and trying to make you believe it. Absolutely, the accuracy and the computational power, those two. And I've seen the acceleration of, let's say, in AI being used more accelerated in the defense side of things and the security technology, which is great. But yeah, it's only a matter of time before the attackers have to switch to it and using it for their advantage as well. And we'll have the battle of algorithms. It's going to be, we'll sit back and watch the algorithms fight and see who can win and come to the answer the fastest.
Yeah, that's definitely gonna be, if we move into, this agentic, development of AI, and, thinking about, a security analyst having, a fleet of agents that are acting on, his or her behalf, against the attacker's agents that are acting. So, and you're right, that's gonna come down to the quality of the data on kind of who wins that. And this is where being able to reason over data that's pertinent to your organization, but making sure you have good intel feeds. But that's also a new attack vector too, being poisoning models. And so it's a lot.
Absolutely. That's one of the things I've seen is the data poisoning side of if they can get into the machine learning and training of the large language models, that's also a massive impact because then you could make incorrect decisions based on the learning and corruption of that. One of the things I wanted to ask you is about how has the CISO role evolved? We've seen the CISOs reporting into various different parts of the organization and responsible for various different things. I always like the kind of area where CISOs are no longer responsible just for IT problems today. It's almost like they're becoming the challenge, responsible for societal and the society itself.
Yes.
How have you seen the role evolve over the years, and where do you see it going even?
Yeah, I definitely see it's emerged, I would say, from the shadows. Generally, CISOs were often seen as the IT, the security guy. But also, don't go talk to them because they're going to tell you no for everything you ask, right? So I think in the current threat landscape, CISOs have really been elevated to the risk manager for the business, which is what the role really is. The CISO can't determine, to accept or, transfer risk personally, but it's acting on behalf of the business. So it's a boardroom level role now for most, especially Fortune 500 roles, but there's still a lot of work to do. Not everybody's there, but I think the conversations are being had, and now the need, especially with the velocity of attacks, ransomware attacks are still increasing year over year. With AI, I think the CISO kind of got left behind a little bit because the IT side of the house was like, we need to develop, we need to deploy AI this, AI that. And the CISO was asking the right questions like, hey, what data are we going to allow to go in? What models are we going to use? Do we have an AI standard to govern the use
the policies
of it? And kind of, the rest of the business is like, I don't know, isn't that your job? So it's been interesting.
It's like we threw security by design out the window for AI, and
We
we're
did.
like, and let's figure it out later. Well, let's accelerate as quick as we possibly can, and we'll do the same as what we did with all the other problems that we had in the past. Is we'll add security at the end, and it's one of those things we have to understand the risks. To your point, that is the role. But I think the important part is the CISO now is not to say no. It's to say how do we do this without putting the organization at risk.
Absolutely. And I used to always say, the CISO or the office of the CISO is not the, no department, NO, but the no department, KNOW. Yes. Most CISOs actually want to be helpful. They want to enable you to do your job, but they want to make sure you're doing it securely to reduce risk across the enterprise. And sometimes that gets lost in translation because, for example, developers just want to develop and, push code as fast as they possible. And sometimes we haven't done ourselves any favors because sometimes we do introduce some friction. But I think as a whole, we've gotten better at integrating. You mentioned secure by design and integrating security into the pipelines, into the deployments, and catching things early on so a lot of rework isn't done. And same thing with AI. You just have to catch it early and put the controls in place to protect, the business, depending on the data. If you're like thinking about health data, because it's a one-way street. Once data goes into, especially if it's a hosted LLM, it's gone.
It's out there. It's literally out of your control, and that's one of the things. Are you still in control of that data or not? And that's the concern. In the AI model itself, is it being anonymized before it gets actually put through the algorithm? And that was so. You tipped on a kind of point that I was wanting to ask you as well. How is governance and compliance and regulations really help, prioritizing CISO's responsibilities? Are they kind of forcing them to do certain things, or is it, are they just kind of, is it also just part of the responsibility in regards to other things as well?
Blanket answer, I would say yes. As you know, Europe usually leads in these type of things. So you think about, the AI Act and really, putting guardrails in place for the usage of AI. So for large multinational companies that, have people in disparate locations, i.e., the EU, yes, absolutely. In the US, we're still trying to figure that out. It's ebbing and flowing, but we're trying to figure that out. But again, it's getting a handle on the data is still, the first thing. You mentioned, the chief data officer, and really leaning and partnering with them to get an understanding of what type of data the organization has, and really putting guardrails on what data, the LLMs, these chatbots can actually access and use is like ground zero, because you don't want to, overexpose data that you can't get back. And then that gets expensive when you start thinking about, some of these fines for, exposing personal data. And, think about GDPR, the right to, remove
You raise
yourself. How does that work with an LLM? How does that work once it's gone? So
That's what goes
that's
back
going to be
into
interesting.
anonymizing it before it goes in.
Right.
That was the key. Same as blockchain. Because if you put personal data on blockchain, you can't get it out. It becomes permanent. For me, absolutely. One of the things I kind of learned when I was talking to a lot of CISOs as well is that they're trying to prioritize things, and I think you've kind of touched on a lot of it. The top of their list is this data security posture management. They want to know the data risk that they've got. And then the second one is the access, which kind of falls into whether it being human identities, non-human identities, resources, and then and then you go down to the next level, which is the infrastructure, security management side of things. Is that where is this all hosted? Is it still traditional on-premise? Is it all my edge devices and my employees and contractors across the world? And then moving down a layer, application security as well. Is that what apps have I deployed? And I think that's where I'm seeing that the different prioritizations that CISOs are looking at. Is that along the lines of what you've seen from the conversations that you've had as well?
Absolutely. When Apple rolled out Apple Intelligence, that was a CISO, board conversation for some organizations, because the leadership wanted to get an understanding of what on device meant and what access these on device models sort of had access to. And I had conversations with CISOs that sort of blocked that update until they got comfortable with the technology. And there were some hard pivots back to company owned devices. We've largely been living in a post COVID BYOD type of world. These chat apps and these LLMs have sort of brought that conversation full circle, because every employee your edge device is your phone or your tablet. And if what level of management can you put on a personal device when it
It's
comes to AI?
That's the other thing as well. So I've always talked about this evolution. We started with the bring your own device 10 plus years ago, and then it moved into the bring your own office, because everyone's working from home. Now it's their printers, it's their networks, and whatever else Wi-Fi access that they've configured from home. It's that bring your own office, and then we'll move into that bring your own identity, where people will just whatever identity they have tied to, they'll actually be bringing that as well. And the next thing will be bring your own agent, your AI agent, which has already been trained on my personality. And it's going to continue that way. And that means that organizations, they're all in the business of not, let's say, provisioning, but it's about, let's say, connecting those users, what they're bringing to their organization. So it all becomes access controls and access policies and insights. But it's going to be an interesting, to your point, the moment you've went so far, I've seen organizations pull a little bit back, saying, because I can only control those devices to a certain point. And I need to have a little bit more control. So it's almost like, you've got that hybrid model. For certain employees, you might say that's fine, but your access is limited to these policies. But for others who might have sensitive access, you might go a bit further and actually say you have to use this. Or even third-party contractors must have, use certain devices as well.
Absolutely. It's a whole new world, man. It's just, the pace of innovation is so fast right now. What was true yesterday might not be true today. And it's great to be alive at this time to see the transformation. But it's also, it's like, man, how do I keep up?
I mean, we were talking, the years that, you were talking about your first computer was a Commodore 64. When you think about the pace of acceleration then, it is, the pace that we've got of technology evolving. You can go to bed one day and wake up the next and everything's changed. That's the pace that we're living in. And it's exciting because, that for me, I'm a person that's always kind of focused around, my education and continuous learning. And for me, I'm always getting excited. What do I have to learn tomorrow? I may have set out some type of agenda or prioritization, but the next day I might have to change because something else has happened already overnight. So
Yep.
what do you kind of, how does CISOs deal with this? What's the best way for them to prioritize and to plan for the future when we're in this such a fast paced industry today?
Oh, that's a great question, man. And this is where one of those old is new and fundamentals, man. We as an industry sometimes don't do the fundamentals well.
To getting to the
And what I
base.
mean, we get into the basics, the identity and access management, the network segmentation, the data security. And, that's under the umbrella of zero trust. I always advise, let's go back to the basics because we can't really master advanced concepts
Hmm.
if you haven't done, the foundational things. A doctor can't do surgery if he hadn't been to medical school. I mean, at least he won't be successful at it.
He can try,
So he could
but he probably
try.
make a lot of mistakes along the way.
But if we're working from a known good foundation, that makes blocking and tackling, i.e., defense, a little bit better when you have at least a, 85, 90% confidence level of inventory across your network. And that's devices, data, identities, etc. Versus if you don't know what's on your network, how can you put forth strategies to defend it? And that's where we are. That's, I
Digital,
think, where
yeah.
AI will help.
Absolutely. Digital intelligence is, or, it's just business intelligence is that, what is that? What do you have to manage? And, then you've got that, what do I have control of? What do I not have control of? Absolutely. The foundation is back to asset management. This really gets like having really good inventory about how the business operates and then what things you can control directly and what things you cannot control. And I think that's so vital. I think over the years, I've done many areas where, asset inventory. I remember one time, just it was a massive organization. And they came and said, we need, licenses for 120,000 machines. We're like, are you sure? Like, we're like, look at our spreadsheet. It's got 120,000 line items in it. I'm like, are you really sure? Let's go and do a real time active, like, just scan a network. And it's like basically going, just finding out what IPs are out there, what's connected, what's coming back. And they were adamant, no, 120,000, that's it. And we're going, no, let's make sure that your spreadsheet is accurate and up to date. So we went and did a scan, 140,000 machines. And we're like, okay, there's and when you think about that, that's 20,000 machine discrepancy. 20,000.
Yes.
And we were thinking, okay, that was a large organization. They had a large company of devices that they didn't even know about. And it fundamentally came down to when we even got, that was just finding those systems that were around and then getting into inventorying them, out of date licenses, out of date software. They hadn't had a virus scan in sometimes years. And what had happened was it was after doing an investigation, as people were getting new devices, the old device was not being properly, their unprovisioning didn't exist. It meant that all of a sudden, the employee moved that machine a little bit to the left and the new shiny one went in, but that one still existed so that they can access old applications that was not supported in the new version, old data that only worked in certain file formats and versions, or that it worked outside the security mechanism so they can actually browse certain sites that had, that could be accessed from the new machine. So it was really that kind of fundamental that on provision just didn't exist. And I went through the energy cost, the power saving actually funded the entire program. Just the power saving of those machines funded the entire unprovisioning program and actually the licenses that they were to pay the company. And it's just getting into that fundamentals. Asset inventory is so vital. And I think sometimes it's an oversight many times, but you're absolutely right. Getting the fundamental basics is so. And you touched also on zero trust. I will say that when you go down that path of zero trust, I always say that sometimes organizations, they also have to make sure they invest equally in zero friction. It's getting that balance right because
Yep.
zero trust is a very security heavy focus, but you also have to make sure that you have that balance of zero friction because at the end of the day, you want people to enjoy security. It should be a metric that we should all be measured on is how do we get people to enjoy what we do? Because in many cases, it used to be in the past, as you mentioned, we were the people that said no, and then they're always like, don't ask them because they'll always say no. And that's where we got shadow IT. And, today we now have shadow AI. But absolutely, we had to be the ones that they want to come to and ask for advice. And as you mentioned, with the people of knowledge when it comes to digital kind of services.
Absolutely. I believe we can absolutely make security fun when you and I actually worked together, this our security awareness program, was gamified. People actually looked forward, to those episodes coming. But
I actually
I
really
think
enjoyed those rather than this very, like false acting people. It's like,
right, right,
I
right.
more enjoyed the cartoon. I enjoyed watching cartoons that brought reality and, and the fictional characters. That was fun versus some of the styles that you get, which is like, the really bad acting
Yep, the
of
bad
corporate
acting.
of corporate security awareness. And so there's light and day between those.
But I think, some of the, we talk about frictionless security. I think some of the best security from an end user experience is security they don't even know is there.
Absolutely. The
They
best one.
just interact with it in their normal flow, but it doesn't stop them. It just complements what they're doing. Those gentle nudges like, hey, you're sharing this externally. You sure?
Yeah.
Because this is labeled like internal confidential. It's not obtrusive. It's just like trust
No.
but verify. It's like,
Yeah.
you sure you want to send
Yeah.
this? And things like that versus, constant interruptions or making people jump through 3 or 4 hoops. And all
Mhm.
that doesn't make an organization more secure. It just teaches the employees how to bring in shadow IT and AI to get
Exactly.
around the guardrails that you put. Those random devices that pop up on your
Mhm.
network. It's like, what's that? I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
They brought in their home computer now because you made it too hard for them to use their company issued one.
And their mobile hotspot. It's
That's
connected to the network and it's filtering everything out, bypassing your firewalls.
pretty
But
much.
introducing a public-facing RDP access into it's the last thing you want people to do is find the technology solutions themselves, because that typically also introduces. We talked about secure by design. I always talk about even secure by default, and unfortunately, a lot of times the default is not the secure way, and most people, they choose the defaults, and that's what we have to get. We have to make sure the default is the best way.
Oh yeah, all you got to do is look at some of these botnets, man. Off these home edge devices, default passwords. So yeah,
1, 2, 3, 4. Many cases are 0, 0, 0, 0. It's from an attacker's perspective. It's a couple of guesses, and they're in, and
pretty
that's what we
much.
have to move away from. You think? What do you see this role going for CISOs? What's your insights for the future of the role itself, and how do you think it's going to evolve?
I think it's going to get more ingrained on the risk side of
Hmm.
businesses because it's already there now. But as if we look at the amount of data that
Hmm.
organizations are producing, humans are producing, that agents and AI is reasoning over, it's going to get more into the data governance, the business risks. You said digital intelligence. I like that. Chief Digital Intelligence Officer. But everything has connectivity now, and
Hmm.
every business is going to, have some sort of AI systems agents. I think one of the things that would keep me up at night if I were a sitting CISO as we move into agents, and how is that really going to be secured? Because now
Hmm.
you have a digital asset that can take actions with certain authorizations, just like a human can. So how are you going to govern that and the proliferation of that across an enterprise? And then on the attacker, side of that, they're just, and ransomware as a service. Now these affiliates are just going to sell agents. Like, hey, take my fleet of agents to go do bad things. So the defense capabilities are going to have to we're going to have to be predictive, I would say, in where we think attacks are going to go based off the specific organization's assets. And that's where, we start looking at things like exposure management
Hmm.
and graph APIs and looking at the entity relationships of assets within the organizations to find choke points or potential, catastrophic failure potentials based off of the exploit of a single, entity or asset. So I think the bot agent perspective is going to be interesting on how we put security guardrails around those, similar to what we have in place for humans. But as they become more autonomous, that gets interesting. And
Absolutely.
in my mind is like, will the bots try to get around guardrails to do things? And that comes back to poisoning. If you poison a model that has an agent deployed, so
That brings us full
I
circle to the whole Skynet discussion. That's where that
yes,
goes. If the agents decide to go, okay, we're going to take things into our own hands because these humans are
right,
stopping us from doing our
right,
job.
right. Right.
It becomes a shadow agent that can have a whole new world result. For me, I completely agree. I think I remember doing research many, many years ago where I was looking at the difference between human accounts and the non-human or machine accounts they refer to as Gartner. At that time, I think it was maybe about almost 10 years ago, it was like 5 to 1. That's literally, for every human that you had an account in the Active Directory or your directory services, there was maybe 5 non-human accounts. I'm looking at the Gartner research from last year, they had it up to 40. So now it's for every one human, it's up to 40. And that's just going to accelerate as we have different agents for different things. And to your point, my concern is that right now, at the moment, a lot of those agents are, let's say, they're assistant agents. They help humans make decisions. But the moment they actually turn it off and say, okay, fully autonomous, which then becomes kinetic-based agents, is that, will they stick to the algorithm that you've set? Or
Right.
will they create their own?
Right. Right. It's like, I think I know better, so let me try
Yeah.
this. And so that's going to be interesting. I mean, I'm as excited about that as I am like, ooh.
I've been, at the beginning of this whole kind of, innovation I've seen, I was like, because I've been watching this for quite a few years now. And I've been, I was pessimistic at the beginning, but I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that humankind will do the right thing and
Right.
that
Right.
we will have, maybe the emergency, I remember what the CIO of the Estonian government said, we need that power off button more than ever that we actually,
Yes.
need today. The moment we start having the no power off button, that's when we have to start getting worried.
Absolutely. Yes, we all need one of those. I need one of those in my basement right now.
So, Terence, how do you stay up to date? Where's the resources you go to? How do you stay informed? So how do you stay educated? Do you have any mentors in the industry? What's the things that you go to keep learning?
Oh man, that's a great question. There are a number of podcasts. Obviously, this one, you know, host of,
Up there in the in the must listen.
but the CyberWire is popular. When I
Dave
go,
Bittner's
yes,
awesome.
yes, Dave is great.
He's amazing.
Also, the CISO series podcast. I've been a
Yeah.
long time listener. David Sparks and
David
that
Spark
crew.
is one of. I always enjoy listening to David Spark and his view and way of he's a very good entertainer and way of simplifying and explaining things. So awesome person.
Yep, and the typical, bleeping computer, dark reading. But I try to network with my peers, as well. And you mentioned, mentors. I have a couple that really have impacted my career. Devin Bryan being one.
Hmm.
He's been a couple of different places in his career, but phenomenal leader. Also, Sean Coughlin,
Hmm.
actually CISO at PayPal right now. But both of those gentlemen kind of took me under their wings,
Hmm.
early on and just helped me out. And of course, Joe, I'll be remiss.
It's bi-directional. I learned so much from you and vice versa as well. We always share, ideas and knowledge. And I think that's what's important is to have, that's what I think is great about this industry is the community side of things is that when we have, ideas or challenges or struggles, that we have people who we can reach out to and we have confidence, to really help us kind of find that, the path forward. And you also have,
Absolutely.
you share a lot of knowledge as well through your newsletter. How can people connect with you or subscribe to the newsletter so they can stay up to date in what you share?
Sure, thanks for that. So you can, I have a couple different entryways into that. You can go to the cyberdeacon.com to sign up for that, or terencedjackson.com. So either or. So kind of different audiences for both, for those two outlets. But man, I just try to share good news each and every day and share something that people can learn from because we're all perpetual learners. In this industry, if you stop learning, you're done.
Yeah, it used to be if you didn't learn something in 5 years, you'd be already kind of, because that was that cycle, the RFP cycle was maybe 3 to 5 years. New software, new hardware replaced. Now it's like, it's containers. It's just like the moment the new containers, things change very, very rapidly. So absolutely. What's the best way? If people do have questions and they want to reach out to you, what's the best way to connect with you?
LinkedIn. I think we can put my LinkedIn, a URL in the chat. But yeah, just find me, follow me on
Absolutely.
LinkedIn. I do respond. Sometimes it gets overwhelming, but I do eventually make it back around to everybody that reaches out.
Likewise as well. I have this, lots of requests comes in and people asking, and absolutely, we do our best to go through all the messages and try to respond accordingly. We'll make sure that we put the links in the show notes as well so people can find them easily. Terence, this has been awesome. I've been really it's a privilege to know you and to be able to learn from you and to see your career growing, and it's always fantastic what you're doing in the security industry and the communities. Many thanks for the awesome work that you do in making the world a safer place. And for the audience, tune in every 2 weeks for the podcast. You'll definitely be educated. You'll get latest news, trends, and some ideas to really help you take your journey and career to the next level, and also to help your organization stay safe and reduce the risk, as well as also, bringing valuable lessons to your family as well, because at the end, security isn't just an IT and business problem. It's a society problem that we all have to do, and to make sure that, our social sphere is protected as well and staying safe. So Terence, awesome. Any last words of wisdom that you want to share with the audience before we close up?
The same that I share pretty much everywhere. Focus on the basics. Basics matter.
Have a good fundamentals in place, a good foundation to kind of get started.
Yes.
It's been awesome. Stay safe, everyone. Take care. Until the next time, thank you and goodbye.
Well, that's a wrap on this episode of the Security by Default podcast, where the only thing we leave unpatched is our sense of humor. I've been your host, Joseph Carson, reminding you to update your software and rotate your passwords. Subscribe, share, and review the podcast. And please stay safe, stay weird, and we'll catch you next time.